Whew. All right. Well, Carolyn says, I love this question so much. Can you explain what happens under the different types of clouds? Did you head for the clouds or try to avoid them? And what she says is, it seems like it could be an approach to life.
Mm. Well, Carolyn being my sister,
Mhm.
thank you for the question. And I noticed that she commented on one of the pictures I put that had a big cloud formation on it. Um, so yeah, so this is an interesting one. It's a little bit of it, sort of, it depends. We definitely look for weather if we are, in areas that are, don't have the wind that we would hope to have. We look for weather formations that are coming that could definitely be generating wind. At the same time, you definitely have to be super aware that in that weather, there's a lot of unpredictable things that can happen, both from sort of thunder and lightning, rain, wind, changes in wind direction. None of that comes sort of advertised when the weather arrives, right? And so,
Mm.
um, a lot of people forget that, especially in this part of the world, about half the race is done in the dark. So the weather, we are not seeing it visually. We have a radar system so we can see if there's moisture in the weather that's around us, but we can't really see what's happening. And our weather forecasts are every 12 hours. So we are we are definitely adjusting our course and our strategy to take advantage of weather systems that would seem to provide favorable wind conditions for us. But we're also very, very cautious about the weather that's around us. And I had a situation when I was helming, I think it was about the middle of the race, or yeah, it must have been around the middle of the race. At night, the wind was building. It was but really dark night, so there's a lot of cloud covers, so no moon, no stars. So you have no real sense of where you're going. You're just following the instruments. And the wind was picking up, and then all of a sudden, and unfortunately, people people that were in the in our navigation area hadn't been watching the radar. We got hit by a really, really significant, um, I guess you could call it a storm, but it was basically, a burst of 50 knot winds, a huge amount of rain,
Wow.
shift in wind direction. Sailing term is a squall, but it was basically came through and lasted for about 25 minutes or so. And if for those that watch the race viewer very carefully, you can see the point that it happened, because we basically had to veer our course off to be able to get the sails down or reduced,
Hmm.
and safely navigate our way through that. But in the middle of that, I'm helming the boat. I've got three people up on the front of the boat trying to help get the sails down, and it's raining so hard and it's so dark I can't see them. Um,
Oh my
and
God.
um, we can't communicate, like verbally can't communicate. And so it was, yeah, from a stress point of view, it was one of the more stressful experiences I've had on a sailboat before, just feeling responsible to get us through that. Mike came up from below, and tried to help manage getting the sails down, and I stayed on the helm, and we, eventually things calmed down and we got through it. But it was a pretty hairy experience, and it was generated by weather that was just coming through very quickly, and other than seeing, even on the radar, we would have only seen a very intense rain uh, element, because you can't see the wind on the radar. It's just telling you how much moisture there is. So we
Mm.
would have seen a very intense rain approaching, which in hindsight, I sure wish we had seen that a little earlier than, than as it arrived. But yeah, so weather's tricky. You know, you use it to your advantage, definitely, but you also have to be very, very cautious about it and keep an eye out for it. And the kinds of clouds uh, that we see, you can read a lot into what the weather is doing based on the kind of cloud formations and the height of the clouds and sort of, you know, the sort of the density of the clouds. So it's something we're constantly paying attention to and using in different ways, as I've described.
It feels like there's two things at play here. Like one is we've got these great instruments that tell us so much. And another is the facts like on the water.
Mm.
Eh, Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and to be honest, the instruments and the forecasts, like the forecasts, are best guess based on, you know, the data that the meteorological data that we have available, and the whole fleet gets the same forecast. The vast majority of the time, it's not terribly accurate to what actually is happening.
Mm,
It, you know, at a high level, it's definitely painting the correct picture, but at a on a boat by boat level, it's not really depicting what we're experiencing. So you have to get, and then most of the instruments are just telling you what's happening in the moment at that particular time.
mm,
Uh, the barometer is a very interesting, and you know, it's a age old tool used by mariners to gauge when the pressure of the atmosphere is changing from low pressure to high pressure, which does tell you that things are changing with the weather. And so that's one tool that is a bit of a forecasting tool, whereas, you know, the wind speed and everything else is just telling you sort of real time what's happening. But you have to use your eyes. You have to use your
yeah.
eyes. You have to notice what's happening. You have to notice the change in atmospheric pressure and try to assess what's going on. Yeah, we're also keeping an eye on how the other boats are performing, which, you know, is every 6 hours, because that can tell you what might be going on for them in the area that they're sailing in and how that might be different than what we're experiencing. And so you're factoring all of that in, trying to make decisions for, you know, for the best interest of our boat.
So, Skipper Mike talked a little bit about there were two sort of sail changes that he was talking about, and one of them he referenced you and Lottie, and it was almost like I can't remember his exact words, but it was something like the clairvoyance of of having a I don't even know what it felt like in that moment, but it was almost like he was saying like they magically knew when to do this and it was the right decision. I don't even know I don't know if you remember that or if there were more than one of those kind of moments, but like can you take us into a moment like that where you're like, "Oh, it feels to me like you're like, something's changing. We need to do something about it."
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good description of what. Now, my senses for that, you know, just thanks to the number of hours I've spent sailing, might be a little bit heightened compared to most people on the boat. That I can sense when the wind is changing, when the sea state is changing, when the conditions, you know, or the sails that we have up could very soon become, you know, the wrong setup for the direction the weather seems to be going. And I mean, one of the things, you know, and perhaps the reason that I'm paying more attention to this is we've had a couple instances in the race where we've really got our performance was really hurt by not anticipating the weather that was going to come early enough and getting the sails all set up and changed before that weather arrived. We instead waited for it to arrive and then had to try to react to it,
Mm,
which was not a good situation, right? You don't want to be in the middle of a squall like I mentioned, and then try to get the sails down to a appropriate level.
mm,
If we had looked at the radar going into that, you know, situation, we would have seen this squall coming and we would have actually adjusted the sails probably half an hour before the squall arrived, and would have been able to probably just keep on sailing through it um,
Mm,
when it did come. So yeah, there are instances where we seem to get the sails changed, and it feels after the fact like just in time. It's like that was magical that we did, but I think it's actually just paying attention and making good decisions to do things based on what we're seeing, and not just waiting to react to everything.
mm,
Um, and there's something to be learned from that. I think anticipating what's going to happen, responding to it. It might feel like you're half an hour early getting the sails, you know, all changed over for the weather when it arrives, but I'll take that half an hour early anytime over trying to deal with it after the fact when we're,
mm.
the boat's on its side and it's sort of chaotic.
There's
Yeah.
been a
Yeah.
wipeout.
Yeah. And that's happened. So, um,
Well, so
yeah.
how does this intersect? First of all, thank you. I mean, so cool. How does this intersect with we've talked a couple of legs ago, we talked about not reacting to everything and trying to continually like if the wind is it about knowing what sort of like area you are in the world or because you described like weather coming from all directions and people trying to react to that and oh do this now do this now do this now and
Mm.
you were like boy I wish we had done that differently like that almost to me it feels like the opposite of what you're describing now like how do you know when to do what.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the situations that I was referring to then were more, I think they were more stable in the sense of the safety and the well-being of the boat. They were
Mm,
more shifts of the direction of the wind, especially in very light wind. Um,
that's right.
yeah, where we were constantly trying to react to the shifts of the wind. This race actually, when we were in light wind, we did a much better job of keeping the boat pointed in the direction we were trying to go.
Yes.
Yes, and adjusting the sails and everything else to accommodate. Um, what we were just talking about is more, yeah, a more intense change where the well-being of the sails and of the boat and of the crew are going to be affected by a significant, usually jump up, but oftentimes also if the wind's easing, we'll want to be ready to take advantage of that by putting a bigger sail up. But it's the one that probably is the most important one is when the wind is building or the conditions are building, and we can sort of see the direction that's going to go, both by what we're experiencing and maybe the forecast, and then just getting a little bit ahead of that, so that we're safely, able to deal with it when it does arrive.
Okay. So yeah. So the difference here is you were what you were trying to do then in a light wind when it wasn't sort of an urgent emerging situation
Mm.
was get where you wanted to go faster. And so what you were what the I remember that you were feeling the way that you were feeling about this, but the orders that were coming or the invitations that were coming were do this, do this, do this, do this. And you were like, oh, if only we could just stay pointed in that direction. Like we would not be going in circles or we would not whatever. So this was
Yeah.
more like, oh, good golly, there's weather coming that we need to it is time to make some changes. Wow, very cool. Um
Mm.
and just super briefly, like when Carolyn says it seems like it could be an approach to life, I think about we've talked a little bit about the barometer inside a human. And
Mhm.
I don't know where else you would take that, but like that this is such I feel like this could be a whole talk in itself.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question, Carolyn. I totally see where the linkage is, and for me, I wouldn't make it so literal that, you know, that every cloud that we see around us or every issue that we see around us, is like the weather. But there's definitely something to be said for being, first of all, paying attention to what's going on around. And much like we've learned, staying the course when it's just little shifts, here and there. And it's just, whether it's, if you're running a business, whether the market is changing or funny things are happening or whatever. It's knowing when to stay the course, and then also knowing when the winds of change are such that you want to make adjustments and take advantage of that change when it's going to be more significant. And I think, for anybody, it's being able to determine which scenario you're in. Is this actually significant change that's going on around me that requires me to respond in some way? Or is it just something that only requires me to know what direction I'm trying to go and stay the course and let it all happen around me, but just, stay focused on what I'm trying to accomplish.
Mm.
Um, I think that, in my own life, I think being able to determine, which scenario am I in, that's a big learning, right? But it just like it is on the boat, the biggest part of it is paying attention. Um, and you mentioned, your inner barometer. Like, your inner barometer is really trusting your intuition. And your intuition is either going to tell you this is not a situation that you need to worry about. These are other people's issues. Is it other people trying to put their problems onto you, or this is just market things that are outside of your control and you just got to stay the course? Or they're things that definitely require you to make an adjustment because they are things within your control. Um, and my sense with most people is the number of things that are actually within our control are typically very, very few as compared to the number that we worry about.
Mm.
Um, and so, um, yeah, I mean, there's lots of clouds that we see up in the sky that we don't worry too much about, and they pass on by, and we just keep on going. And then there's some that we definitely get all hands on deck and change the sails and get ready to deal with. And all of that just sort of helps us keep our performance going in the right direction, and keeps us safe and keeps our boat intact, and over the long term keeps us in as good a performance as we can.
Wow. Very cool.